Emma was only 4 years old when her world quietly changed forever. She did not understand big words, adult problems, or the heavy sadness that lived in her mother's eyes. She only knew that some nights, her mother would sit in the kitchen, holding a cup with both hands, staring at nothing for a long time. Emma would watch from behind the doorway, wondering if she should say something, but she never did. She had already learned that silence was safer than questions. Her mother was young, beautiful, and broken in ways Emma could not see. Life had been unfair to her long before Emma was born. She was doing her best, but her best never seemed enough. Bills piled up, food was sometimes missing from the fridge, and arguments with neighbors or strangers happened more often than laughter. Emma lived in a constant state of confusion. She didn't know if tomorrow would be calm or full of yelling. Sometimes her mother hugged her so tightly she could barely breathe, and other times she walked past Emma like she wasn't there at all. Emma's father had left before she could remember. When people asked her about him, she only said, "He doesn't live with us," because that was the truth she understood. She didn't know if he was alive, if he cared, or if he even thought of her. Her mother never talked about him, and Emma had learned not to ask. One rainy night, everything changed. Emma was half asleep on the old couch with a thin blanket, listening to the sound of rain hitting the window. Her mother sat beside her, running her fingers through Emma's curly hair. "You're such a beautiful girl," she whispered, voice shaky. Emma smiled sleepily, thinking it was one of those rare soft moments, but she didn't know that these words were a goodbye. The next morning, Emma woke up to a quiet house. There was no smell of tea, no sound of footsteps, no voice calling her name. She looked around, dragging her blanket across the floor. She called out, "Mama," but no one answered. The house felt bigger, emptier, like something important had been taken away. Her mother hadn't packed everything, only a few clothes and personal things. Emma didn't notice that, but the adults who later came to collect her did. To her, the biggest missing thing was the woman who used to comb her hair and whisper goodnight. Emma waited on the couch, hugging her stuffed rabbit, thinking her mother would walk through the door and say it was all a mistake. Hours passed. Then strange adults arrived, neighbors, social workers, people with serious faces and soft voices. They spoke slowly, as if speaking to someone broken. "You'll be staying with family," they said. "Everything will be okay." But nothing felt okay to Emma. She didn't cry loudly, she didn't throw tantrums, she didn't ask questions. She simply sat in silence, trying to understand why the world suddenly looked different. Somewhere inside her small heart, she blamed herself. Children often do because they don't understand adult pain. She wondered if she had done something wrong. Maybe she hadn't been good enough, quiet enough, or clever enough. Maybe she had caused her mother's sadness without meaning to. The family she moved in with were distant relatives, people she had seen only twice in her life. They had a stable home, rules, routines, and a life that did not have space for chaos. They were kind in an emotionless way. They fed her, clothed her, and provided what she needed, but they did not know how to comfort a child who had lost her entire world overnight. Emma did not speak much, even though she had spoken normally before. Words felt heavy, unnecessary. She lived inside her thoughts, trying to remember the sound of her mother's laugh, trying to remember if she had ever truly felt loved. She often sat in her new bedroom, staring at the window, hoping a familiar face would appear outside, waving, smiling, calling her name. But days turned into weeks and weeks into months, and no one came. Other children in the neighborhood asked her to play, but she always shook her head. She didn't know how to pretend to be happy. She didn't know how to talk about herself. When they asked, "Where is your mom?" she would simply say, "She's gone." Then she would walk away before they could ask more. She wasn't angry at them. She just didn't want to explain something she didn't understand herself. Nighttime was the hardest. Emma would curl up on her bed, eyes wide open, waiting for sleep that never came. She missed the sound of her mother humming quietly, even if the humming came after crying. She missed the smell of her mother's perfume, even if it was old and faded. She missed being held, even if it only happened on rare, gentle nights. She missed a woman who had been both her comfort and her deepest wound. No one told Emma the truth, that her mother left because she believed Emma deserved a better life than she could give. That leaving had broken her too. That abandonment was not hatred, but a painful sacrifice. Emma was too young to know these things. All she knew was that she had been left behind, and the world expected her to keep moving without asking why. In her loneliness, Emma learned something important about herself. She could survive sadness quietly. She could carry pain without screaming. She could keep walking even when she wanted to stop. She didn't know it then, but this silent strength would one day be transformed into music so powerful that the world would listen, hold its breath, and finally see the girl who had once been invisible. Emma's new home was quiet in a different way. It wasn't loud with arguments or filled with broken promises. Instead, it was a cold, silent place where emotions were tucked away like unwanted clutter. The relatives who took her in were not cruel, but they were not warm either. They believed children should be seen, not heard. They believed food, shelter, and school were enough to raise a child. Love was optional and on most days unavailable. Emma was given a small room painted pale blue. There were toys from their own children packed away neatly in boxes, as if joy was something that had to be stored instead of shared. Emma looked at the toys, but she never opened the boxes. She didn't want someone else's memories, she missed her own. She attended a local school, but she didn't make friends. She sat quietly in class, doing her work without smiling or speaking unless she absolutely had to. Teachers often described her as a well-behaved child, but none of them knew the truth. She wasn't well-behaved, she was simply empty. She didn't have the energy to misbehave or the confidence to draw attention to herself. During recess, she sat alone under a tree watching other children play. They ran, laughed, fell, cried, and started all over again. Emma observed them like someone watching a world she didn't belong in. She didn't understand how children could be so carefree when the world could change in a single night. She didn't understand how they could argue one minute and hug the next. She didn't understand how happiness worked anymore. At home, the routine was always the same. Breakfast quietly, school quietly, homework quietly, dinner quietly. If she spoke too loudly, someone would remind her, indoor voices, Emma. If she didn't eat enough, someone would say, finish your plate, Emma. If she took too long washing her hands, someone would tap on the door and say, hurry up, Emma. Everything was controlled, measured, predictable, except Emma's heart. Sometimes, late at night, she would sit on her bed and squeeze her stuffed rabbit tightly, the last physical piece of her old life. She didn't know whether to hate her mother or miss her. Some nights, she cried silently into her pillow. Other nights, she stared at the ceiling, too tired to cry, too hurt to sleep. No one ever came to comfort her. Her relatives assumed her quiet nature was healthy adjustment, not emotional survival. They believed time heals everything, but they didn't understand that time doesn't heal what is ignored. Time only hides it deeper. Emma learned how to move without making noise. She walked softly, closed doors carefully, laughed silently, and cried privately. She thought feelings were dangerous things meant to be locked away. Because whenever she accidentally showed emotion, sadness, fear, confusion, someone would say, you're fine, don't be dramatic. So she stopped trying. People often mistook her silence for shyness. They didn't see that it was actually fear and loneliness disguised as good behavior. She wasn't shy. She was afraid of taking up space. She was afraid that if she needed too much, loved too deeply, cried too loudly, someone else might walk away. School assignments sometimes asked students to write about their families. Kids wrote cheerful paragraphs about family dinners, vacations, and happy moments. Emma stared at her blank page, wondering what to write. She couldn't write about her mother leaving. She couldn't write about a father she never knew. She couldn't write about relatives who treated affection like an expensive luxury. So she wrote one sentence. I live with my family and I go to school every day. Her teacher circled it with a red pen and wrote, add more details. But Emma didn't have more details to give. On weekends, her relatives watched TV or did chores. Emma sat on the armchair with her knees pulled up, reading books far above her age level. She loved stories, not for their happy endings, but for their characters. Characters had reasons for being sad, angry, brave, broken. Characters had motives. They were allowed to feel things she was. When she read, she disappeared from her world. She didn't have to be the quiet girl no one understood. She could be someone bold, adventurous, important. At school, a teacher once asked her what she wanted to be when she grew up. Kids shouted doctor, singer, footballer. Emma said softly, I don't know. The teacher smiled and replied, you have plenty of time to figure it out. But Emma wasn't sure. She didn't see herself becoming anything. She didn't see a future worth imagining. She only saw long, gray days stitched together with silence. The only person who seemed to notice her struggle was a boy named Liam, who sat beside her in class. He would sometimes ask if she wanted to play or eat lunch together, but Emma always said, no, thank you, in the politest way possible. She wasn't rejecting him, she was protecting herself from disappointment. She had lost one person she loved. She didn't think she could survive losing another. Despite everything, Emma wasn't a bitter child. She didn't hate the world or the people in it. She was simply tired of pretending to be okay. Tired of waiting for someone to choose her. Tired of hoping for something better. She didn't know that life hadn't abandoned her forever. She didn't know that something unexpected, something made of melody and emotion, would soon enter her world. She didn't know that one day, she would sit in front of a wooden piano and find the one thing that made her feel alive again. For now, she was just a quiet girl in a silent house, waiting without knowing what she was waiting for. Winter had just started when Emma discovered the piano, though she didn't mean to find anything that day. She was only looking for a place to sit quietly, away from noisy classmates who suddenly became lively after school. The community center near her neighborhood offered after-school activities, but Emma didn't join any of them. She went there because it was warm, and because being alone in a public place felt less lonely than being alone at home. The building was old, with long hallways that smelled faintly of dust and paint. Emma walked slowly, hugging her backpack to her chest, listening to the muffled sounds of children laughing behind doors. She didn't understand how they found energy for joy after school. She barely had energy to breathe. At the end of the hallway was a room with an open door. Inside, sunlight streamed through tall windows, lighting up wooden floors and old furniture. In the middle of the room stood a piano, large, dark brown, and beautiful in a quiet, tired way. Emma had seen pianos in pictures, but never one in real life. She stepped closer, curious, drawn to it like a magnet. No one was inside. The room felt abandoned, like it belonged to the past. Emma hesitated, afraid to touch something that looked too precious for her small hands, but then she reached out and pressed one key gently. The note echoed, soft and lonely, filling the room. Emma froze. She had expected a noise, of course, but she wasn't prepared for how alive the sound felt. It wasn't loud, sharp, or bold. It was delicate, like a whisper that only she could hear. She pressed another key and another. She didn't know what she was doing, but the piano didn't judge her. It didn't tell her to speak quieter or hurry up or behave. It simply responded. Each note was like a tiny message from a world she had never visited. A world where she wasn't invisible. A world where speaking didn't require words. For the first time in months, Emma felt a spark of curiosity. Not happiness, she wasn't ready for that, but a gentle pull toward something new. She slid onto the bench, her legs dangling awkwardly, and began pressing random keys, softly at first, then with more confidence. The sound filled the room, messy and clumsy, but to Emma it felt like magic. She began to notice how different keys made different emotions, some bright, some heavy, some sweet, some sad. She didn't know musical terms like melody, harmony, rhythm. She only knew how the sounds made her feel. The piano didn't just play notes, it spoke emotions. Emma spent an hour at the piano before someone appeared. A middle-aged man with a broom leaned into the doorway, staring in surprise. Emma whipped her hands back, thinking she would be scolded, but he only blinked, confused. "You play?" he asked. Emma shook her head quickly, too nervous to speak. He smiled a little and said, "You can keep going, just don't bang on it." Emma nodded shyly. He walked away, leaving her alone again. She waited a few seconds, making sure he wasn't coming back, then placed her fingers on the keys once more. She didn't know how to create music, but she did know how to express feelings she had never spoken aloud. Her hands moved in cautious patterns, searching, exploring. She didn't realize she was smiling, not a big smile, not a loud smile, but a small one, the kind that belongs to someone finding peace after a long time. The next day she came back. The day after that too. The piano room became her secret sanctuary. Nobody asked her questions there. Nobody reminded her to behave. Nobody asked about her mother. She could sit for hours and let the piano speak for her because it said the things she couldn't say out loud. "I miss you. I'm scared. I don't know who I am. I need something to hold on to." Some days she played slowly, as if each note was too heavy to lift. Other days her hands moved faster, small explosions of energy she didn't know she had. The music was chaotic, imperfect, broken, just like her heart. But that was the beauty of it. The piano didn't need her to be perfect, it only needed her to show up. The staff at the community center occasionally passed by the room and listened. They whispered to each other, curious about this quiet girl who played with so much emotion yet didn't follow a single rule of music. They could hear that she wasn't trained, but they also heard something rare: honesty. One woman, a volunteer who taught music classes, tried to speak to Emma one afternoon. "Do you want lessons?" she asked gently. Emma shook her head, eyes lowering. She didn't want structure, she didn't want rules. She didn't want someone telling her what music should sound like, she wanted freedom. The woman didn't push, she only said, "You play with your heart. That matters more than anything." Emma didn't know what that meant yet, but she understood that she wasn't being criticized. She was being seen. At home, nothing changed. The silence remained heavy, the conversations short. But inside Emma, something subtle had shifted. She had found a space where she didn't feel small. A space where her emotions weren't mistakes. A space where she wasn't abandoned. She didn't know it yet, but this old piano would soon turn her quiet survival into something unheard, unexpected, and unforgettable. The world hadn't noticed her before, but it would. And all of it began with a lonely child pressing one key in an empty room, just to hear what pain sounded like when turned into music. Over the next few months, Emma's connection to the piano grew stronger, even though she still didn't know how to read music or play a real song. She wasn't trying to become talented, she was trying to survive. Every afternoon, she rushed to the community center, dropped her backpack on the floor, and sat at the piano like someone who finally found a language she could speak. People at the center were used to loud sports, noisy games, and excited groups of children. But when Emma played, the building became strangely quiet. Workers pretended not to listen, but they slowed their steps when passing the doorway. Teenagers waiting for their activities leaned against the wall, secretly recording short videos on their phones. whispering to each other about that tiny girl who plays like she's crying without tears. Emma didn't notice any of this. She played with her head slightly bent, eyes sometimes closed, fingers wandering across the keys. She wasn't performing for anyone. She was pouring something out of her heart that she couldn't hold inside forever. One afternoon, as she played a soft, wandering melody, a group of children her age entered the room. They were loud, joking, pushing each other, but they suddenly stopped when they heard the music. Emma lifted her hands immediately, afraid she had done something wrong. She expected laughter, teasing, or rude comments, but instead one of the kids said, "Keep going." Another added, "We want to hear." Emma shook her head quickly, eyes down. She didn't play for audiences, she barely played for herself. Having people watch her felt scary, personal, as if they were watching her soul instead of her hands. The children stood there silently for a few seconds waiting. But Emma couldn't continue, not with eyes on her. Her heart beat too fast and her fingers felt stiff. Eventually they left, talking loudly again, leaving the room and the girl behind. Emma sat alone, embarrassed by her fear. She didn't want attention, she didn't want pressure, she just wanted to feel safe. So she waited until the hallway was silent before she started playing again. The staff noticed her behavior, not just her music. They noticed how she avoided eye contact, how she flinched when someone praised her, how she disappeared the moment a crowd formed. She wasn't shy, she was trained by pain to stay small and unseen. But raw talent has a way of attracting attention even when the person doesn't want it. One winter evening, a young volunteer named Sarah stayed behind to clean up after a holiday event. She passed by the music room and saw Emma sitting at the piano, lost in her own world. Sarah quietly pulled out her phone and recorded a short video. No zoom, no filters, no fancy angles. Just a child, alone, playing with emotion deeper than most adults understood. Sarah didn't upload it for attention. She wasn't trying to make anything viral. She simply shared it on her personal social media with a short caption. "I don't know this girl's story, but she plays like she's lived 1,000 lives." She expected a few likes, some comments from friends, maybe someone saying, "That's sweet." But something unexpected happened. People began sharing it. Not because of flawless skills, Emma often hit the wrong notes, but because of the emotion behind every sound. Comments poured in from strangers. "This feels like heartbreak. Why am I crying watching this? Who is she?" Within 2 days, the post had thousands of views. Within a week, it spread beyond Sarah's small circle, reaching people who didn't even know where it came from. But Emma still had no idea her playing was being seen by strangers. She continued visiting the piano room with the same quiet routine, unaware that her private healing was becoming public. Other volunteers began watching her more closely now, fascinated by her gift. Some whispered, "She needs lessons." Others said she needs a stage. A few said she needs help because they sensed the sadness beneath the music. One afternoon, Sarah approached Emma gently. "There's something you should know," she said. Emma looked up, confused. "A video of you playing was shared online. A lot of people saw it. They loved it." Emma froze. Her first reaction wasn't happiness or excitement. It was fear. Fear that people were watching her. Fear that her private feelings were exposed. She thought she had done something bad. "I didn't mean," she started, voice trembling. Sarah placed a calm hand on her shoulder. "You didn't do anything wrong. People loved your playing because it's real. You don't have to perform. Just be yourself." Emma didn't know how to respond. She didn't know if being seen was good or dangerous. That night she went home and stared at the ceiling for hours. She wondered what strangers saw in her. Did they see a sad girl pretending to be okay? Did they hear the loneliness in her music? Or did they just see talent without the pain behind it? For the first time, she felt conflicted. Part of her wanted to stay hidden forever. Another part wondered if this attention meant something, if her life could change because of the sound she made. The next day, when she sat at the piano, her hands shook. She didn't know if someone would record her again. She didn't know if she should hide her feelings or let them spill from her fingertips. But after a few minutes, she stopped thinking. She let the music flow, soft at first, then stronger, honest, vulnerable, comforting. It wasn't perfect. It wasn't polished, but it was real, and people heard it. Even if Emma didn't realize it yet, her lonely melody was no longer just the sound of a hidden child. It was the beginning of something much bigger, something that would soon change her life. Emma didn't know that her music was slowly opening doors she never asked for. She only knew that the piano was the one place where she felt something close to safety. But the world beyond the community center had started to take interest in her. People were sharing her video, commenting, asking questions, and posting emotional reactions, even though none of them knew her name. One afternoon, the community center decided to host a small talent showcase. It wasn't a big event, not something famous or expensive. It was just a local gathering where children could sing, dance, or perform anything they were proud of. Sarah suggested Emma should play piano there. As soon as Emma heard the idea, her stomach tightened. "No," she whispered quickly, "I can't." You don't have to do it for anyone, Sarah said gently, just do it for yourself. But that didn't make sense to Emma. If she did it for herself, why would she do it on a stage? Performing meant being watched meant being judged, and she had spent most of her life trying to disappear. Days passed and she tried to ignore the event. She didn't sign up, she didn't talk about it. She told herself it didn't matter. But every time she sat at the piano, she imagined what it would feel like to play while people listened. Not secretly, not from the hallway, but directly. Would they understand her? Or would they laugh at the mistakes she made? Emma practiced by herself every day, not because she wanted to prepare, but because the piano had become the only way she could breathe without feeling heavy. Sometimes she would stop in the middle of playing and stare at her hands, wondering how something so small could carry so much sadness. She didn't see talent in herself, she saw survival. One afternoon, Sarah sat beside her on the bench. "I signed you up," she said quietly. Emma's heart dropped. "Why would you do that?" she asked, eyes wide with panic. "Because I believe you deserve to be heard," Sarah said. Emma shook her head. "I'm not good enough." "What?" "You're not supposed to be good," Sarah said softly. "You're supposed to be honest. That's what makes your music beautiful." Emma didn't believe her, but she didn't argue. She didn't have the energy to fight someone who meant well. The night of the showcase arrived faster than she expected. The community center was decorated with strings of tiny lights and colorful banners. Parents filled the chairs, smiling proudly at their children. People laughed, clapped, and cheered. Emma sat backstage, knees shaking, staring at her shoes. Her name was 13th on the list. She counted the acts before her, listening to muffled performances through the curtain. Some kids sang loudly, some danced with confidence, some forgot their lines and laughed it off. Emma wondered how they could perform so fearlessly. She wondered how they didn't feel like running away. When her turn came, she walked slowly onto the stage. Her hands were sweaty and her heartbeat felt too loud. She could feel eyes on her, hundreds of them, or maybe only dozens. She didn't look up to count. She just sat at the piano, feet barely touching the floor, and waited for something inside her to calm down. Silence filled the room. For a moment, she considered running away. She imagined standing up, walking off stage, and hiding somewhere dark and quiet. She wondered if anyone would even stop her. But then she remembered the first time she touched the piano. She remembered how the sound made her feel like she wasn't invisible. She remembered how music let her say the things she couldn't speak. She placed her fingers on the keys, and she played. Not perfectly, not fearlessly, but truthfully. Her melody started slow, almost uncertain, like someone trying to walk after being trapped in darkness. But soon the notes deepened, grew richer, fuller, brighter. She let the music tell her story. Every high note carried a memory. Every soft chord carried a wound. She didn't think about the audience. She didn't think about mistakes. She didn't think about being watched. The piano was her world, and the world was finally listening. People held their breath. Some leaned forward. Some closed their eyes, letting the sound enter them like a quiet confession. Emma wasn't playing a song she had learned. She was playing feelings she never said aloud. The ending of her piece was delicate, fading softly, as if the music didn't want to leave. When she pressed the final key, the room stayed silent for a moment, like no one wanted to break what they had just heard. Then a wave of applause filled the room. Not polite clapping, not casual appreciation, a standing ovation. Emma stared at her hands, confused. She didn't understand what she had done. She didn't understand why people were cheering. She didn't understand how something so broken could make others feel something beautiful. Sarah rushed to her afterward, eyes wet, voice trembling. "You have no idea how special you are," she whispered. But Emma didn't know how to accept compliments. She didn't know how to believe them. She simply shrugged, uncomfortable with attention. But something inside her had shifted. She had stood in front of people who could have judged her, mocked her, ignored her, and instead they listened. They didn't laugh, they didn't walk away. They stayed, they heard her. For the first time in her life, Emma realized something. Maybe her story didn't have to stay hidden forever. Maybe her pain wasn't weakness. Maybe it was strength. Maybe the music she played wasn't just for her survival. Maybe it was for others too. It wasn't just for her survival. Maybe it was for others too. She didn't know that a recording of that performance would soon spread far beyond the walls of that community center. She didn't know that millions of strangers would one day hear her music and gasp at the truth behind it. For now, she was just a girl walking off a small stage, heart pounding, unaware that her life had just changed. Emma's performance at the small community showcase was not planned to impress the world. It was meant to be a local event, meaningful only to the children and families who attended. But someone in the audience had recorded the entire performance on their phone, not just a short clip this time, but the whole piece. Every shaky beginning, every emotional rise, and every fragile ending. That recording didn't stay local for long. Within a few days, it appeared online. Not uploaded by Sarah, but by a stranger who simply titled the video, "Little Girl Plays Piano with Heartbreaking Emotion." At first, it received a few hundred views, then a few thousand. Then tens of thousands, people didn't just listen, they reacted, they commented, they cried, they shared. They passed it from one person to another like a secret worth spreading. Nobody knew her name, nobody knew her history. They only knew a quiet child had played something that reached deep inside them. Comments appeared from people around the world. This music feels like a story of someone broken but brave. I don't know who she is, but she made me cry. This is the most beautiful thing I've heard in a long time. Emma didn't know any of this at first. She continued her regular routine, school, silence, piano, but soon she noticed small changes around her. When she walked into the community center, people looked at her with soft eyes as if they knew something she didn't. Strangers whispered her name even though she hadn't told it to them. Sarah finally sat her down one afternoon. "The video from your performance, it has gone viral," she said gently. Emma blinked. "What does that mean?" "Well, it means millions of people have seen it. They've heard you play." Millions? Emma didn't understand the number. It sounded impossible, too big, too unreal. How could millions of people watch a small girl from nowhere playing a piece she didn't even know had a name? She felt overwhelmed, confused, even frightened. Being seen by a few people at the showcase had been terrifying enough. The idea of being seen by millions felt unreal, like a dream she wasn't prepared for. That night she lay awake, thinking about strangers who had listened to her. She imagined them staring at screens, watching her tiny hands move across the keys. Did they see her pain? Did they hear her loneliness? Did they know she wasn't trying to perform, just trying to exist? The next morning, she walked through school hallways and noticed people whispering. Some smiled shyly at her. Some stared openly. One girl ran up to her and said, "I saw you on the internet, you're amazing." Emma felt her face heat with embarrassment. She mumbled something unclear and quickly walked away. She didn't know how to handle attention. She didn't know how to accept praise. All her life, she had trained herself to be invisible. Now, suddenly, the world wanted to look at her. At home, her relatives also heard about the video. Their reaction was surprising. They didn't scream or celebrate. They didn't hug her or congratulate her. They simply said, "We need to be careful. People will ask questions." Emma waited for warmth. She waited for someone to say they were proud. No one did. She realized fame didn't magically fix emptiness. Applause didn't build a home. Millions of people loving her music didn't guarantee even one person loving her. Yet something else happened, something she didn't expect. People began sending messages to the community center. Emails, letters, even small packages. They weren't for the staff, they were for her. Some said, "Thank you for helping me through a dark time." Some said, "You reminded me of someone I lost." Some said, "Your music gave me hope." Emma read these messages slowly, trying to understand how people could be touched by someone they didn't know. She realized something beautiful. Even though she had played from loneliness, others heard connection. Even though she had played from pain, others heard healing. Even though she had played from abandonment, others heard love. News reporters called the community center asking for interviews. Music teachers offered free lessons. Event organizers invited her to perform. Suddenly, adults everywhere were interested in the child they had once ignored. But Emma didn't jump at opportunities. She didn't want stages or cameras. She didn't want attention for the sake of attention. She wanted something much simpler: clarity. She wanted to understand why people cared about her music when she herself felt so ordinary. Sarah explained it gently. "People feel what you feel, Emma. You play the truth and people recognize it." That sentence stayed with her. For the first time, Emma began to understand that art wasn't about perfection. It wasn't about being fearless or smart or trained. It was about emotion. And somehow she had given the world something real, but the world's reaction didn't stop with admiration. Some people online began asking, "Who is she?" Others said, "What's her story?" A few wrote, "Where are her parents?" With attention came curiosity. With curiosity came questions. Questions Emma wasn't ready to answer. Because a huge part of the world wanted to know how someone so young could play with such heartbreak. They wanted to know why her music sounded like crying. What no one expected, not even Emma, was that someone watching from afar, someone who had walked away long ago, would also see that video and realize the child she left behind had found a voice powerful enough to reach her. For the first time in years, Emma's mother would feel something strong enough to break through her silence. And she would come back, not because the world was watching, but because her child had finally been heard. Emma's mother had disappeared from her life years ago, leaving behind only questions and a child who never understood why love could vanish overnight. She rebuilt her life in another town, working small jobs, renting cheap rooms, and trying to pretend she had never been a mother at all. Pretending was easier than facing the guilt that followed her like a shadow. But she was not heartless. She was wounded, ashamed, and convinced that Emma would live a better life without her. Then one evening, she was scrolling online, absent-mindedly watching videos, when she came across a thumbnail of a young girl sitting at a piano. Something about the girl's posture, The way her shoulders curved inward, the way her head tilted slightly, felt familiar. She clicked on the video, not expecting anything emotional, just curiosity. But when the girl played, her heart stopped. She did not know the music, but she recognized the pain. She recognized the softness, the fragility, the loneliness hidden inside each note. She recognized the child not by her face but by her feelings. By the time the video ended, she was crying. Not quietly, not politely, but with shaking hands and broken sounds escaping her lips. She searched the comments, desperate to know more. Who was this girl? Where was she from? How old was she? Then, buried among thousands of messages, she found a comment from someone who recognized the community center. And suddenly, everything clicked. This wasn't just a talented child. This wasn't just a random musician. This was her daughter. The realization knocked all the air from her chest. She whispered Emma's name out loud for the first time in years. She said it like a prayer, like a plea, like a confession. She didn't click away. She didn't scroll on. She watched the video again and again and again. She noticed the fear in Emma's eyes at the beginning. She noticed the courage that slowly replaced it. She noticed the trembling hands that grew steady as the music took over. She noticed the tiny frown at the end, as if Emma didn't believe she had done anything special. She whispered, "I'm so sorry." Not to anyone in particular, just to the screen, to the universe, to her child who could not hear her. Days passed and the video grew more popular. News articles appeared. People called the performance a miracle, a masterpiece, a child with an old soul. Her mother read every word, each one a reminder of what she had abandoned. She knew she had no right to return. She knew her daughter might hate her. She knew the world would not forgive a mother who walked away, but she also knew something else. Emma wasn't invisible anymore. She wasn't silent. She wasn't broken beyond repair. She had found something powerful enough to heal her, something powerful enough to reach millions, even powerful enough to reach the woman who left her behind. Her mother packed a small bag. Not because she planned to move back permanently, but because she felt she had to see Emma, even if only once. She traveled by bus, stomach knotted with fear, hands shaking with regret. The community center looked older than she remembered. The building seemed tired but alive. She waited outside for hours, afraid to walk inside. She imagined Emma seeing her and turning away. She imagined her relatives stepping in and telling her to leave. She imagined being hated, rejected, punished. But she also imagined Emma's music, not the sound of perfection, but the sound of survival. Finally, she stepped through the door. One of the staff members recognized her from old records. He looked surprised, even confused. "Emma is here," he said, gesturing toward the music room. "She comes every afternoon." Her mother stood in the hallway, staring at the open door where sunlight spilled through. She could hear soft notes drifting out, gentle, uncertain, beautiful. She walked quietly to the doorway. Emma sat at the piano, lost in her own world, playing something slow and sad. She didn't see her mother at first. She only saw the keys, the instrument, the safe space she had created from pieces of pain. Her mother listened, tears running silently down her cheeks. She could hear years of loneliness in those notes, years of confusion, years of unspoken questions. But she also heard strength. When Emma stopped playing and turned slightly, she froze. Their eyes met, not dramatic, not loud, just two people face to face for the first time in years. Emma didn't run, she didn't cry, she didn't smile. She simply stared wide-eyed, as if trying to understand whether the ghost in front of her was real. Her mother's voice broke as she whispered, "I'm sorry." One simple, broken sentence. Emma did not answer. She didn't know what to say. She didn't know how to feel. She had imagined this moment before, but not like this. Not with her mother crying, not with her mother looking fragile, not with her mother admitting she had done something unforgivable. Her mother stepped forward slowly, hands trembling. "I don't expect you to forgive me. I don't expect anything. I just needed to see you because I heard you. For the first time, I heard you." Emma opened her mouth, but no words came out. Her throat felt tight, her heart confused. She wasn't ready to forgive. She wasn't ready to forget. She wasn't ready to let go of everything she had carried. But she wasn't ready to turn away either. They stood in silence, two broken lives staring at each other, unsure how to begin again. Slowly, Emma whispered, "I don't know what to say." Her mother nodded, tears falling harder. "You don't have to say anything. You've already said everything through your music." Emma didn't embrace her, she didn't shout at her, she didn't run. She simply sat back down at the piano and placed her hands on the keys. Then she played. Not a song of forgiveness, not a song of reunion, but a song of truth, uncertain, emotional, unfinished. Her mother listened, crying quietly, because she understood that Emma wasn't ready to give answers. And music was the only language they could share. After that first meeting, nothing magically changed overnight. Emma's mother didn't suddenly become a constant presence, and Emma didn't suddenly know how to deal with the weight of her return. Life didn't turn into a fairy tale just because they stood in the same room again. But something small, fragile, and important had begun. Her mother started visiting the community center every few days, sitting quietly at the back of the room while Emma played. She never interrupted, never pushed conversation. She just listened as if listening was a form of apology. Sometimes she would leave without a word. Sometimes she would whisper "thank you" before walking away. Emma didn't always acknowledge her. She didn't know how, she didn't know what to feel. Her heart was a mixture of anger, grief, curiosity, and something that felt like longing but was too painful to name. She wanted answers, but she also feared them. She wanted connection, but she also feared being abandoned again. Still, she played. Every day she poured her confusion into music. Some days the notes sounded hopeful, like sunlight. Other days they sounded heavy, like something sinking deep underwater. Emma didn't label her feelings, she just turned them into sound. The world outside continued to react to her performance from the showcase. Music teachers reached out with offers, talent scouts sent messages, and news stations made requests for interviews. Social media users begged for more videos, desperate to hear her play again, but Emma avoided it all. Fame felt like a bright light she wasn't ready to stand under. She wasn't sure who she was yet, not a prodigy, not a miracle child, not a symbol of strength. She was simply a girl still learning how to breathe. One afternoon, Sarah approached her gently. "You don't have to accept anything if you don't want to," she said. "But the world wants to hear you again. You can decide when and how." Emma nodded but didn't answer. The thought of performing again terrified her. The thought of lying awake afterward, worrying about every note, every flaw, every reaction, that scared her even more. But there was another thought hidden underneath fear. Somewhere deep inside, she wondered if music could become more than a secret refuge. Maybe it could become the future she never imagined. One evening, Emma and her mother found themselves alone in the piano room together. The sun was setting, filling the room with golden light. Emma was adjusting the sheet music she never actually read when her mother sat down in the chair closest to the piano. For a long time, neither of them spoke. Then her mother asked quietly, "Do you hate me?" Emma's fingers tightened around the edge of the bench. She didn't know how to answer. She didn't want to lie, but she didn't want to hurt someone who already looked broken. "I don't hate you," she whispered, "but I don't understand." Her mother nodded slowly, eyes shining with tears she tried to hide. "I didn't know how to love you the way you deserved," she said. "I thought leaving would give you a better life. I thought I would only ruin you." Emma looked down at her hands. "You leaving ruined me too," she said, voice barely audible. Her mother cried openly, then quietly and painfully, like someone who had finally realized the cost of her choices. She reached out but stopped halfway, unsure if she was allowed to offer comfort. "I want to be better," she whispered. "I don't know how, but I want to try, even if you never forgive me." Emma didn't respond. Forgiveness didn't work like a light switch. It was slow, it was complicated, it was a process, not a moment, but she didn't walk away. That was something. Over time, Emma began to realize something important. Music had given her power. Not power over others, but power over her own pain. It allowed her to transform loneliness into something meaningful. It allowed her to speak without speaking. It allowed her to exist without apology. One day she sat at the piano and asked Sarah, "If someone feels broken, can music fix them?" Sarah smiled softly. "Music doesn't fix people," she said, "but it gives them a place to heal." Emma looked at the piano, suddenly understanding something she hadn't understood before. She wasn't just playing because she loved it. She was playing because she needed it. Her music wasn't perfect, it was medicine. And medicine is most powerful when shared. Months passed. Slowly, gently, carefully, Emma agreed to perform again, not in front of a huge audience, not on television, but at another local event similar to the first. This time she didn't tremble as much. This time she didn't run from attention. This time she didn't feel alone. Because this time her mother sat in the crowd, not as a ghost from her past, but as a witness to her present. Emma played a piece she had written herself. It didn't hide her pain and it didn't celebrate victory. It was somewhere in the middle, honest, wounded healing. When the final note faded, the audience applauded, but Emma didn't look at them. She looked at her mother. Her mother didn't cheer loudly. She didn't shout her name. She simply pressed her hands to her lips, eyes full of pride and sorrow mixed together. Emma didn't smile, but she nodded just a little. It wasn't forgiveness. But it was a beginning. Emma continued to play piano, turning pain into purpose, loneliness into connection, silence into art. She didn't know where life would lead, concert halls, small stages, or just this old piano room she loved. But she knew one thing with certainty. Her music had rescued her, reshaped her, and revealed her. She had once been a child abandoned. Now she was a child becoming, not because someone saved her, but because she found a voice powerful enough to save herself. Found a voice powerful enough to save herself.